What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Casual Wrestling Podcast, the number one rated pro wrestling podcast for casual wrestling fans. I am NerdyD, you are part of the CWC, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. Each week, we dive deeper into four of wrestling's biggest questions. If you like what you hear, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to us on. Tonight, we are talking about predicting the next 5 world champions in WWE. We are going to induct the first class into the AEW Hall of Fame, and we are going to rank the best wrestling ring fits without knowing who's next. But first, we have a little bit of housekeeping for the show. So not a lot to talk about this week. We're trucking along, finding the rhythm of doing weekly content, and the vibe seems to be positive right now from you guys. We just blew past 4,000 subs on YouTube. The Spotify looks like it is on the uprise. So we're continuing to grow, hoping to get to 5,000 by the end of the year. It's looking like we're on pace to do that. If you guys make sure to share every episode that you watch with someone else who is a wrestling fan, whether they're casual or IWC, I don't care. Maybe they end up hating me, but share the content with them. Hopefully we can continue to grow this channel. There are big things on the horizon. I am currently working on something that I think will make our community extremely unique. It might take a couple of months, but probably before the end of the year, we will announce that. But that's pretty much it for housekeeping this week. We can jump right into topic number 1 tonight. So the IWC and the internet have started the rumor mill back up with all of this Edge to AEW nonsense. And I still don't believe that this is an actual thing. I have a hard time finding this to be true, but for the sake of podcasting, I think we have a little fun. And let's play a game of what if this week. What if Edge actually makes the jump and shows up in an AEW ring? So I kind of took a look back the last couple of days to really reflect and think about what truly happens if Edge makes the jump. And he finishes out his career inside of an AEW ring. What are the pros? What are the cons? What are we really looking at as wrestling fans? And if I'm AEW and I'm an IWC fan, I have to be trying to look at this through rose-colored glasses. You know, how do I spin this to make the entire wrestling world feel like this is the greatest signing of all time? That's what they're going to try to do. Just like they did with the Wembley thing, which now looks like it could possibly be backfiring on them a little bit. If Edge makes the jump, the IWC will absolutely try to make this sound like the biggest thing that's ever happened in pro wrestling. But there was a point in time for me, I even think I said it on this podcast, that Edge signing with AEW would be the second biggest acquisition of AEW's history since it's been around. And I think that in typical NerdyD fashion, that was a little bit of an overreaction. I think that I'm going to walk that back just a little bit, because the reality is we have to be honest with where Edge is in his career at this point and the age that Edge is at, and what he actually has to offer to the wrestling world. So let's talk about the positives for AEW if Edge decided to join the company for the next couple of weeks, for the next couple of months, for the next couple of years. There's one thing that will always reign true about Edge, and that is his name holds tremendous marketing value within the wrestling world. I do absolutely think that there's a plethora of matches that you could put Edge's name on a marquee next to someone else, and it would motivate most casual wrestling fans to at least peek their heads around the corner to see what's going on. And I imagine that wrestling fans would be intrigued by the idea of something like Kenny Omega versus Edge. I think that there would be intrigue with anything that's Edge and Christian based. I think that there would be intrigue in anything that involved, you know, Edge and the Hardys, Edge and the Young Bucks. So there are matches to be made. And I think that if you're Tony Khan, you really have to make the decision to write that check purely based on nostalgia. But here's the negative. Can Edge actually perform up to the standard that most wrestling fans, especially IWC, are going to expect to see when they see that name, the rated R superstar? I saw the last match with Sheamus, And while it wasn't a bad match, it definitely looked like a match of an expiring superstar, of somebody who's getting up there in age. Edge definitely doesn't move in the ring like he used to. And sadly, Edge is never going to give us one of those remarkable TLC matches that we are probably going to want and expect. We're just not going to get that last go around. We're not going to get this last epic TLC match with the Hardy Boys or some high energy, high impact match with the Young Bucks. And I hate that the sad reality is that we're more than likely going to see an Edge in AEW that picks and chooses his spots and is more likely to talk more than he wrestles, which once again, we know with the AEW crowd that absolutely clashes with what they want to see. Now, I think there's something that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to Edge, and that is the similarities in Edge and CM Punk and kind of the impact that they're expected to have within another company. We had all these expectations for CM Punk, and when he didn't exactly live up to those, the IWC turned on him. And I think those same expectations would be put on Edge if he made the jump over to AEW. But here's the problem. Guys like CM Punk and guys like Edge, they spent an entire career in a WWE ring doing things the WWE way. And for them to go into AEW, they expect the politics to sort of fall in line with what they expect in WWE's style of wrestling. And the problem is, I think when those guys actually get into an AEW locker room, there's a bit of shell shock. I think that the initial feeling might be, there's a level of freedom within AEW. Like, oh man, I can pretty much book my match and do anything I want, and it's going to be cool with Tony Khan. But then I think that feeling quickly fades, and the freedom turns into, this is a fucking shit show. I'm involved in a circus now. And there's no rhyme or reason for anything that's happening on this show. And I can say anything I want. I can do anything I want. But guess what? The other guy in the ring can say anything he wants and do anything he wants. And typically what you get when you do that is you get a pissing contest between two alpha males standing in a ring, butting heads, and the story absolutely gets lost. Here's the problem. AEW is constantly just a dick measuring contest. Oh, you could flip? Watch me flip. Oh, you could take a chair shot? Well, then I'll take a baseball bat shot. Oh, you're going to jump off a ladder tonight? Well, then I'll jump back first into a coffin. I don't see Edge thriving in that environment. But let's get back to the positive. If you're an AEW fan or you're AEW, let's just say you're Tony Khan. You have to understand that you have possibly one of the biggest retirement matches of all time in pro wrestling in the chamber, ready to go. When you decide to pull that trigger, and that match involves Christian and Edge in some form or fashion. But here's my issue. Tony Khan has shown a tendency to absolutely ignore what is right in front of him. I'll give you an example. Bryan Danielson's title run. The non-existent one. The one where when he came over from WWE to AEW and got into a ring with Kenny Omega, you should have put that title on Bryan Danielson, and you didn't. And I think Tony Khan has this tendency to try to be unnecessarily creative in his booking to bleed out a bunch of dream matchups instead of creating the story that most people want to see. And I think what he would do with Edge is take an aging superstar, and rather than protect him for that one big moment, I think he would try to get Edge involved in as many dream marquee matchups that he possibly could. But here's something. Let's place some realistic bets. Let's just say, even though I don't believe it's happening, let's play make-believe, and let's say Edge jumps to AEW. Let me drop 3 little gems of wisdom here that I'm going to call NerdyD magical predictions. If Edge goes to AEW, I guarantee he gets hurt before actually getting to that metaphorical finish line with Christian. He won't get a retirement match. He will get injured before the time comes for that proper match. Number 2, Edge will bump heads with the elite backstage because he just won't bow down to the AEW style of booking. Number 3, Christian Cage will get derailed from whatever storyline he is involved in because he will be pulled into being an NPC in Edge's retirement story. You can mark all 3 of those down. There's a sad reality to all this. At this point, Edge, he's a name. He's just a name that's for sale. He's not really a talent. And I know that is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but that is a reality. This is a bidding war for an IP. This is a bidding war to have the name Edge cross the finish line wearing your logo. If Edge signs with AEW, it's not going to move the needle. It's more like a firework display. He's not CM Punk. He doesn't come with an insanely loyal fan base. Sure, some people will watch, but they're not going to stick around if it's not good. The nostalgia will fade away quickly. If he overstays his welcome, the fans will let him know, and he'll disappear into the background, sort of the way that Bryan Danielson did for the mass majority of wrestling fans. He's not as talented as Bryan Danielson. When Bryan Danielson made the jump from WWE to AEW, there was still a lot left in the tank that you could use on TV from week to week. He's not as disgruntled as Jon Moxley. So he's not going to come into AEW with all of these sparks and firepower talking bad about WWE. So what you get is Edge, just pure Edge. You get to talk about his volume of work. You get to talk about his legacy. But he's Michael Jordan on the Wizards. He's not Michael Jordan on the Bulls. If I'm Tony Khan, I absolutely pay the price tag, whatever it is, and immediately I bring Edge in and I get right to the good stuff. Right? In and out. Edge versus Christian. Edge and Christian versus the Young Bucks. Edge and Christian versus the Hardys. Christian turning on Edge at some point. Do those 4-5 series of matches and then get him retired and get him out of the company. But I still am on the mindset that Edge is not going to AEW. You know, if Edge is going to AEW, it feels to me like a sad old man just trying to hang on to that last little bit. It really feels like a Brett Favre situation to me. A guy who just stays past his welcome. Edge has nothing left to prove. There's nothing more for him to do. He's not winning an AEW world title. You know, WWE will always be there if he leaves well enough alone. But if he decides to burn down this bridge, what for? To wrestle a bunch of indie guys? To go wrestle your best friend one more time? That just doesn't seem like the last chapter of a legacy I would want if I was Edge. So this last week on the Monday Night Raw post show, I talked a little bit about my fatigue with Seth Rollins and Shinsuke Nakamura and how I just kind of felt that the World Heavyweight title as a whole was starting to lose a little bit of that shiny new title look. You know, it's losing that new leather smell. And that it was time for WWE to actually start creating interesting story around that title, because as far as I'm concerned, the Intercontinental Championship is the major title on Raw right now, and the World Heavyweight title is a secondary title. But actually after that, I got into a conversation in the Discord with We Too Deep and Barney ATM about sort of the length of WWE title runs and how there was honestly no parity left in WWE anymore. There's no underdogs anymore. There's no surprise title drops. Even as casual fans, we are to a point where we can see the title run template that WWE is using, and we begin to kind of sense when a title is in jeopardy, right? We all know that Gunther's at the end of his run. We all know that Roman Reigns will make it to WrestleMania. Rhea Ripley will retain her title as long as she's over with the crowd. And Io Sky is the most interesting champion right now for the simple fact that it's a game of how long does WWE like this experiment. You know, we're already talking in the Discord about WrestleMania matches for the women's title that have no involvement of Io Sky in them. That goes to show you that as fans, it's too predictable. We have our thumb on the pulse of what's going on. And I will tell you, I'm a UFC fan. And one of the reasons that UFC is so fun is besides the brutality, which, a lot of people like, it's the parity. The short title runs, those are normal in UFC. Guys win titles, and then the next pay-per-view that they're involved in, they immediately drop them. Could you imagine a title run in WWE where the title got dropped in 3 consecutive premium live events? The IWC would absolutely lose their shit. Let's just, for example, say Seth Rollins drops to Shinsuke Nakamura at Fastlane. Then Shinsuke drops to Finn Balor. Then Finn Balor drops it back to Seth, who then drops it to LA Knight. In the matter of 4 months, that's the kind of shit that could happen in UFC that just we know as fans will not happen in WWE. WWE is starting to program us to believe that titles are jewelry and they're not precious artifacts that every superstar wants to rip out of your hands at every second of every day. I think unknowingly WWE lessens the value of these long title runs by creating multiple within 1 year. Think about it. Roman Reigns is on this epic title run. But what are we talking about right now? Gunther's title run. And before that, it was Bianca Belair, who was on some Monday Night Raw's longest women's title streak. We all lost interest in her. The longer this Gunther thing goes, I think we'll begin to lose interest in Gunther. Champions have to lose. Babyfaces have to face adversity. Heels have to face adversity. Rhea Ripley should drop the women's championship to Nia Jax immediately and have to figure out how to gain it back. That's interesting. Just running through a list of opponents so that somewhere down the line, WWE can put up a pretty little graphic of all the people you've beat. That's not storytelling. The IC title should absolutely bounce around after Gunther to show that it's not that easy to hold on to for a long time. The more it bounces around after Gunther, the more impressive his ability to keep it for as long as he did looks as far as optics go. The United States title should bounce back and forth on SmackDown. It should change hands every couple of weeks. But the IWC has absolutely ruined parity in wrestling by acting like titles that bounce around are in some way less prestigious and less significant. How often do we hear the IWC say, this guy's going to bring the prestige back to the Intercontinental title with this long run? No, these superstars need to earn it. If they're not resonating with the fans, immediately take that belt off of them. Use Austin Theory as the perfect example. He was literally a lame duck champion for almost a year with the United States title that he didn't elevate and it didn't elevate him. Let me ask you guys this. Did you guys prefer that long Austin Theory title run that meant nothing? Or would you have rather seen that title bounce around to worthy guys like Chad Gable, Montez Ford, LA Knight? Let those guys have a little bit of burn, see what they could do with it. And I am a firm believer that if something's not working, rip the title off and let's move on to the next thing. I used to be on the side of the argument that WWE just needed more titles. We just need more titles. The problem with WWE is we don't have enough titles. And I'll still argue that. To an extent, I'll still argue that I think WWE could use a couple more titles. But I think lately, and more importantly, WWE needs more parity. They just need more champions. You need more title changes. And I really hope that Endeavor steps in at some point and tries to add some of the elements that make UFC feel so exciting and so kind of that bring the parity to UFC. I hope they step in and bring that realistic feel to WWE where it feels like on any given night, anything can happen. Here's the truth. The best moments in pro wrestling are title changes, surprise returns, and promos that feel real. Most people don't remember matches. There's a couple nerds out there, and that, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but there's a couple people who remember matches. But for the most part, we remember when titles change, we remember when superstars return, and we remember the promos that felt real. And that's it. So having said all of that, let's do a little thought experiment here. I'm going to jump back into my role as lead booker for WWE, and I'm going to book out the next 5 champions for each of the major titles in WWE. World Heavyweight Championship, Undisputed WWE Championship, Women's World Title, and WWE Women's Title. So let's start with Io Sky. I think that's the simplest one for me to start off with. And we'll go from Io Sky. I think sometime in the near future, we've had our little experiment. Io drops it to Charlotte. Big surprise, right? Charlotte's champion again. But from Charlotte, I think around Royal Rumble, I have Charlotte drop it to Bianca Belair and kind of a freak surprise match. Something that we didn't expect Bianca to win, but all of a sudden, oh my God, Bianca won, Bianca's champion again. And I do that a couple weeks before Royal Rumble, giving Charlotte still time to get back into the Royal Rumble. And I have Charlotte win the Royal Rumble. And so what that means is that her previous title win would put her at 15, leaving her just 1 away from her dad's 16-time world champion record. So the whole build to WrestleMania 40 could literally be about Charlotte tying the record on the biggest stage of them all. Then what you do is at WrestleMania 40, night 1 main event, Charlotte versus Bianca Belair. The optics write themselves. Charlotte beats Bianca Belair, becomes the 16-time world champion. Ric Flair comes out, gives her a hug. Bianca Belair gives her a hug. The whole women's roster comes out, gives her a hug. And Charlotte kind of officially becomes crowned the greatest women's wrestler of all time. So that gives you your next 3. Your next 3 champions would be Charlotte, Bianca Belair, and Charlotte again. And I know you guys go, oh my God, NerdyD, that's the same people over and over. Let's get some parity. All right, let's bring some parity in. Following Monday Night Raw, after WrestleMania, you have Tiffany Stratton show up, make her debut, and attack Charlotte Flair, similar to kind of what happened between Paige and AJ Lee back in the day. And I drive that directly into a passing of the guard story between Tiffany and Charlotte, ending up with at some point Tiffany getting a short run as the WWE Women's Champion. And so from there, I think it's anyone's game, but you could make the argument that it would be a perfect time to bring Bianca back into the picture as a heel. And so the next 5 WWE Women's Champions, I think, are going to be Charlotte, Bianca, Charlotte, Tiffany Stratton, and a heel Bianca Belair. So now let's work through Rhea Ripley's Women's World Title. And I said it earlier, but I think you immediately have Rhea drop to Nia in the very near future. And then a couple weeks later, you have her win it back as well, just creating that parity I'm talking about. Like at any time, anybody can lose and anybody can win. And so you have Rhea kind of regain her stance as a dominant champion. We roll around to WrestleMania time. I think Becky Lynch shows up, but I think you have Becky fail to beat Rhea Ripley, kind of giving her the stamp moving forward as being, the next up and coming thing. And I think as the Judgment Day starts to implode post WrestleMania, you have Raquel Rodriguez sneak into the title picture and eventually, get the win and go over Rhea Ripley. So what that does is that leaves you with, we go Nia, then Rhea, then Raquel. That's 3. From there, I think we'd be coming up around the Money in the Bank time. This is where I would bring in Cora Jade to pick up the win in the Money in the Bank match, get the briefcase. I would have Raquel Rodriguez turn heel at some point in this run and do a program with somebody like Liv Morgan. I do Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez at SummerSlam, where Liv would upset Raquel Rodriguez and become the new WWE Women's World Champion, and immediately get cashed in on by Cora Jade, leaving us with the run of Cora Jade. So for that title, it'd go Nia, Rhea, Raquel, Liv, Cora Jade. I think that all makes sense. Let's do the World Heavyweight Championship. This is fairly straightforward to me. Seth drops to Shinsuke. I think that Finn Balor wins a world title opportunity at some point. I think Finn Balor beats Shinsuke Nakamura, takes the title. Here's the kicker. I think that comes right around Royal Rumble. All of Judgment Day enters the Royal Rumble. Finn, Damian, Dom, and Rhea. I think they dominate the Royal Rumble. I think that somehow, in some mix-up of a way, Dominic Mysterio ends up winning the Royal Rumble. So at WrestleMania, we get Dominic Mysterio versus Finn Balor for the World Heavyweight Championship. I think that during that match, the Judgment Day turn on Finn Balor and Dominic Mysterio wins the title, which I know. Holy shit, I'm booking Dominic Mysterio to be a world champion after saying he never should be, but it makes sense in this instance. So I have Dominic win the title. The crowd is booing like crazy. He's got the title. He's jumping around. He's so excited. Turns around. Damian hits him with the briefcase. Cashes in. Damian Priest leaves WrestleMania as the world champion. Shinsuke. So what we have there is Shinsuke, Finn, Dom, Damian. And at this point, Damian Priest goes on for his little run as a babyface champion after turning on Dom, ending with at some point, I don't know how you get there, but a showdown with Gunther, which ultimately leads to the beginning of Gunther as a world heavyweight champion. I think that's pretty solid. And then last we have Roman Reigns belt the undisputed WWE title. I think it's pretty straightforward to me that WrestleMania, Cody versus Roman. This time Cody goes over, becoming the new undisputed champion, finishing the story. From there, it's really just anybody's guess. It's all fantasy booking from there. I would run back Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes somewhere down the line and have Seth Rollins win the undisputed WWE title. I just like the optics of having Seth Rollins as your undisputed WWE title. I think it also sets up a fun match of doing something like Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul. And having Logan Paul win that title at some point and just experimenting with the idea of seeing what a reality star with the number one podcast in the world looks like as your WWE champion. The Logan Paul then rolls right into something with LA Knight. That's something that's been teased before that fans wanted to see. So then you go LA Knight versus Logan Paul. You have LA Knight win the title for a short little run, and you finish it up with something. Why not introduce the world to Braun Breaker as a heel champion? You do LA Knight versus Braun Breaker, ultimately leading to Braun Breaker being your champion. So your 5 there would be Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Logan Paul, LA Knight, and Braun Breaker. Let me know if you guys would book that differently. So I brought up the difficult decision that WWE will face in the upcoming next couple of years as certain guys start to wind down in AEW and retire from that company. There are going to be a couple of guys who had significant runs within WWE that WWE will be faced with either acknowledging or ignoring at some point. Guys like Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and I'm sure there's going to be more over time. But the reality is that the WWE is going to have to make a decision whether to honor those guys into the WWE Hall of Fame or snub them and pretend like they just never existed. And if they do acknowledge them, do they just pretend like there never was an AEW portion of their career? Or will WWE actually acknowledge that they went on to do even bigger things inside of another company? But here's the weird thing that I think you have to think about, and it really hasn't ever been talked about because WWE bought WCW before it got to that point. But the WWE Hall of Fame is kind of an anomaly as far as Hall of Fames go. There's no other sport where the Hall of Fame is managed and controlled directly by the company that owns it. The NBA, the NFL, the MLB, they're all separate entities from their respective Hall of Fames, which in like logical terms means that more than likely AEW wrestlers really don't have a path to be recognized in a Hall of Fame, and most casual fans will never see them in some form of the Hall of Fame. So the reality is one of 3 things can happen. There's the impossible. WWE decides to open up the Hall of Fame to all companies of wrestling and creates a voting system so they can control the narrative of leading the industry and naming the Hall of Fame after the WWE. Not going to happen, but it's an option. There's the unlikely. A third party steps up and creates a neutral Hall of Fame with a voting system that recognizes wrestlers from all wrestling companies. The only problem here is that most, wrestling journalists tend to just favor a certain company. So there's not going to be much parity. You're going to have guys who vote for AEW guys and guys who vote for WWE guys. Then you have the most likely scenario, and that is that at some point, Tony Khan decides that AEW needs a Hall of Fame, and he begins the same process as the WWE by introducing members of his company into a Hall of Fame. and that's I think that's the most logical option. But I think there is a fourth option where Tony Khan is that third party that creates kind of a decentralized Hall of Fame for pro wrestling and kind of standardizes the voting system that is actually fair. To be fair with Tony Khan, this feels like one of his strengths, kind of, appeasing wrestling fans, and a neutral Hall of Fame seems to be something that would be kind of looked at positively by wrestling fans in general. But for the sake of the podcast, let's just say Tony Khan goes with option number 3 and he creates the AEW Hall of Fame. So the question then becomes, what's the first class? Who headlines? Who makes it in? Who's not in? And that's where I come in. That's where NerdyD comes in to clear this all up, because the IWC, they're a bunch of dipshits. They immediately would go, here it is, our opportunity to build a shrine for Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and Adam Page, and we'll just throw an IWC orgy talking about how great they are. Yeah, that's expected, but that's the wrong answer. That's not what you do. That's not the marketable play. There's 5 names right now that deserve to go into the AEW Hall of Fame in its first year of existence, and I will tell you who they are. Let's start off with number 1, someone that I don't know a lot about, but I know enough about the history of AEW to know that this makes sense. And number 1 is Riho. That's your first women's champion. She was instrumental in building the women's division in AEW, and she was also instrumental in creating the culture that is AEW. It's the culture that I don't like. It's the international wrestling. She's the epitome of an IWC wrestler. She's almost on no casual fans' radar. This was the first signs of AEW showing commitment to the Japanese culture of wrestling and kind of bringing in people from outside companies. So Riho, number 1. Number 2, Sting. You're going to need a big name that makes a splash with the older fans, and Sting is that person. Sting will bring in the casual attention. Everyone in the wrestling world knows who Sting is. Everybody outside of the wrestling world probably recognizes Sting. He transcends just AEW. He'll bring you culture from WCW, TNA. He's well recognized by everybody that's a fan of WWE, and he kind of bridges the gap for AEW to like wrestling lore and wrestling history. So you go Riho, you go Sting, third, you go Brody Lee. And this goes without saying. You honor your greats. And there's not a person in wrestling who says a bad thing about him. So you honor him. You actually name your Hall of Fame after him. You name it the Brody Lee Hall of Fame, with each superstar getting a Brody Lee Hall of Fame award. Then number 4, you go Chris Jericho. Because Jericho joining the AEW was the game changer. His star power, his credibility brought significant eyeballs to the product. It was the reason that I tuned in initially. He was a seasoned veteran. He put over some of the younger talent. He talked up the younger talent, but he still was able to maintain his status as one of the top wrestlers in the business. And so there's no way you talk about AEW without talking about Chris Jericho. Those early on YouTube videos and promos were completely fueled by Chris Jericho. And number 5, Cody Rhodes. He's the foundation. He's the original pillar. You could talk about the 4 pillars all you want, but this is the house that Cody Rhodes built. His journey from WWE to independent superstar, then eventually to co-founding AEW, that's the story. That's the reality. He was a wrestler. He was an executive. He's been at the forefront of all of AEW's successes early on. I think that he would be my headliner into the Hall of Fame because the emotion that would outpour from that man, the speeches that he would give, I think that the entire wrestling world would tune in to see what he had to say in that moment. So that's year 1. That's what I do. If I'm booking year 1 of the AEW Hall of Fame, that's what I do. And if I'm AEW after that first class of 5 people, From there on out, I induct 1 to 3 people in a year. I'm not making a standard of like 5 names. I'm doing it if there's 3 people who deserve to go in, we'll vote them in. I try to keep it feeling exclusive, because one thing about WWE is it feels like as we get closer to WrestleMania, they just they have to pick names out of a hat that makes sense. And I don't think that bodes well for the quality of your Hall of Fame. So I would try to keep it at retired AEW superstars at that point. Like if Bryan Danielson retires this year, I would have him headline year number 2. I wouldn't get to Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks until they were retired and finished with wrestling and only working in the VP roles that they currently have. But let me know if I left anybody out. So this week I'm going to be making a top 10 list of wrestling looks / wrestling gear. Hopefully we come up with a list that makes sense. I have created a spinning wheel that has the entire WWE roster on it, so I will use that this week. Maybe next week I'll get more sophisticated and make a filter that like pops up on your forehead and cycles through the pictures. But for this week, I have my handy spinning wheel. So here we go. 10 wrestlers based on wrestling gear. Wrestler number 1 is going to be Mansoor. So based on looks and based on this list, I'm going to go Mansoor at number 8. I'm going to put Mansoor at 8 because I think there will be worse than Mansoor. Second up is Cameron Grimes. Let's go 6. Let's go 6 for Cameron Grimes. And I'm probably setting myself up for failure early on by not thinking this through more. We'll spin again. Third one, Dirty Dom. I'm gonna go Dirty Dom at 4. Dirty Dom's kind of stepped up his game with all the Judgment Day t-shirts, so I'm not mad at Dirty Dom. Alexa Bliss, 2. Let's go Alexa Bliss at 2. LA Knight. Where do you put LA Knight on this list? Because his gear's not overly exciting. Is his gear better? Let's go 3. LA Knight at 3. Spin the wheel again. Liv Morgan. I'm gonna go Liv Morgan at 1. And I think I'm gonna regret that. Liv Morgan tends to have some cool gear. Seth Rollins. I'm not a fan. I'm going Seth Rollins at 9. People are gonna be mad about that. I'm going Seth Rollins at 9. Let's see. Jinder Mahal, I'll go at 7. Santos Escobar, I'll put Santos Escobar at number 5, which means last one has to be number 10. Who is it going to be? Roman Reigns at number 10. That's horrible. This absolutely did not go the way I wanted it to. So, okay. My top 10 list of the best ring gear in the WWE is at number 10, Roman Reigns. At number 9, Seth Rollins. At number 8, Mansoor. At number 7, Jinder Mahal. At number 6, Cameron Grimes. At number 5, Santos Escobar. At number 4, Dirty Dom. At number 3, LA Knight. At number 2, Alexa Bliss. And at number 1, Liv Morgan. You guys go ahead, pick my part of the list. Tell me where I went wrong, because that was absolutely atrocious. But that is it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check out the Champ and the Chick every Monday afternoon, the Monday Night Raw post show every Monday night, and the Friday Night SmackDown post show every Friday night. Keep hitting that like button. You guys are the gas that grows the fire of this channel. Tell your friends to tell a friend. Spam the casual wrestling community every chance you get. And as always, keep it casual. I'm tapping out.
Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Hey, casual wrestling community show. You already know, talking WWE. Keep it rolling and hosted by Notorious NerdyD. Dope show that you gon' find. Tune in cause it's online. Hit 'em with a figure 4 leg lock, power driver, or clothesline. We bringing that heat like the show.